And welcome back to Saturday Night Chit Chat. And I told you all each week that 2021, we keep upping the ante each week. And I'm so excited to have one of the most inventive musicians, songwriters, bass players, and good folk out there, which is always probably the most important point. Mr. Mike Gordon, how you doing, Mike?
Good, thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's very cool to have you here. So I always start off asking everybody kind of the same question in a different way. How have you been through this last, 10, 11, 12 months? I mean, to keep yourself, what have you been doing? How are things? What have you been doing to keep yourself creative and busy and all that kind of stuff?
Well, the biggest thing is it's been just great for me. Of course, there's difficulties, and we know people who have had tragedies, so of course that's not great. But for me and my creative work, it's been heaven. Because for about, I think it's been 6.5 months now, I've worked every weekday, all afternoon on my album. It's about 2 albums worth of stuff, and it's not going to come out anytime soon, but eventually. So I always wanted to do that. When we have a great producer, engineer, and the whole team and the band line up, usually there's a week or two. You go in, you record some basic tracks, and then you have time to overdub. But this is like, it's all gonna take its time. And there were some live performances that got translated into studio sounding things, so there's still the band playing together, but I really wanted to do the layering thing, like Stevie Wonder or whoever.
Sure.
And so there have been creative challenges every day, and it's just been incredible. So yeah,
let me ask you this. Have you and we'll stay on this for a second, because this is one thing that's always fascinating, and you and I get in conversations about this a lot, is you're obviously a bass player, you're a songwriter, obviously you're a touring musician, but with all your fascination with studio recording and sounds and soundscapes and all that, does do you know where that comes? I mean, when you were a kid, do you have a little 4-track tape player when you were a teenager and started doing recordings then? I mean, is that something you've been kind of dealing with your whole life, kind of?
Pretty much. What you made me think of is when I was, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old, I really liked the idea of creating a room, like a multimedia room. This is long before VR glasses, where you would have all the senses stimulated. And so what I did during high school is I was a basement level room, and in the middle of it, we had a nice wooden floor. It wasn't sheetrock or anything. So I put 4 chains and I hung a wooden platform, like one of those pallets that you see, and with curtains around it. And then I had a 4-track reel-to-reel tape recorder.
Oh, wow.
And I definitely like to experiment. Was always like the electronics tinkering guy. But I put 4 speakers around the platform. And then on the reel-to-reel, this might sound a little technical, but I think the layman can understand this. I barely understood it myself, but it worked. So the output of channel 1 goes into the input of channel 2. The output of channel 2 goes into the input of channel 3, round robin.
Oh, nice.
Because the tape head and the record head and the play head are separated, that's how you can get echoes with a reel-to-reel.
Yeah.
You put something into the record head and it gets played back on the play head a split second later. But that was delaying. So if I played my guitar on this platform with curtains all around it, kind of like hovering back and forth, I would hear it echo around me in a circle.
Oh, wow.
And I recorded some music and wrote some music on the platform. Not that the sound itself was that interesting compared to what I'm getting to do now, actually, with some prompts from the incredible Sean Everett, who's sort of producing or at least mixing from afar. Wild stuff. I know I've sent you a couple.
And Sean did your last album too, correct?
He did a go-go.
Yes.
Yeah, currently he's up for 3 out of the 5 best engineered albums Grammys. Amazing. 3 nominations out of 5. But he's just insanely creative and fun. Those 10 days were 10 of the best days of my life, where my own band, the quintet, went down to Somerville, Mass. And the studio was great too, Q Division. And they had just closets full of old keyboards. And so for every song, people would be running across the control room. Here's another one. And Robert Walter's so good. Oh, here's another one. 10 different tracks of crazy old keyboards and everything else. And Sean you know, he would have me like sing into a Coke can with a transducer in it, and put the output of the transducer into a guitar amp and mic that from across the room, and that's the vocal track.
Wow.
Etc. Everything was like that. He mic'd the drum set with blankets over it, and there were headphone cups on the toms and earbuds as the microphone taped to the hi-hat. So there was just this, it was colorful, and it was a great studio, great team. It just, everything was. So this time though, we were gonna go into the Catskills, into a studio last year. Of course, that was canceled, but I really was kind of trepidatious about going in there at all, because these songs are more layered and more electronic, a few of them, and I didn't want to just kind of like make it like a jam band in a room, kind of like go. I mean, it's a good team, but so this was just perfect for me. And then, you know, if I had me and Leo Kottke put out an album, but we would have done touring. We still hope to do a little, but even that would have gotten in the way of every day, day after day.
Yeah.
So, you know, I always, Prince said this thing where he would have his band practice, I don't know, 6 days a week, long hours for a year with no tour and no album. And I thought, you know, how tight would that band be doing that?
Yeah.
Not goal-oriented for an upcoming gig or something. And I can't do that because I wanted to do that. But people's schedules are what they are. So this is that, but it's recording. And people are sending things that I can incorporate, and I can try. I took all the, you know, guitars and basses out of my old house and put them in a temporary spot, and I go in and I light a fire and I just experiment. So anyway, fun.
Wow, awesome. You're going to be building that platform down in your basement then too.
I know.
That's awesome.
Yeah, well, just an aside, I met this guy, Mark Howard. He's a legendary producer. He wrote the book Listen Up, which is amazing, just about building recording installations, making some incredible album with like Bob Dylan or U2 or whatever, and then tearing it down and finding a mansion in the woods and doing another one, and real quick. And it's very inspiring. So some of this process has been inspired by him. Oh, so when I met him, we had these coincidences. My first concert, I tell everyone it was Jay Giles. I told Peter Wolf this, who was the singer, in 1980, Boston Garden, but it wasn't, because I remembered that, let's see, I would have been 15. So 1 year earlier, I saw James Brown on a rotating stage in Toronto. Like, who would forget that as their first concert?
Wow. Like a whole band though, right? Not just him. Like it was him.
Oh, it was a big band. It was all disco. It was 1980. You know, it was a little more disco than funk. And so Mark Howard, this producer, when I met him through a friend of a friend, he had a platform in his room hanging from the ceiling when he was in high school, and his first concert was that same one, because he was from Toronto. It's like, oh, we're kindred spirits. We got to do an album together. Anyway.
Now, I think I know this answer to the question, but I'm not 100% sure. In terms of instruments, was bass your first instrument, or did you start like on piano or guitar? Piano. Okay, got it.
Piano when I was 7. My grandmother gave us a baby grand. I've heard people
lessons, the whole 9 yards.
I had a few. My best friend Rebecca Kolodny, who lived down the hill. We got our ham radio licenses together, so we could talk to China, and instead we just talked to each other from 1,000 feet away. Anyway, but she was my first teacher, and then I started working with her teacher, and then I went through a few. So there was lessons. I really liked. There's this guy Bill Gordon. He was kind of cool. He was teaching me jazz chords, and eventually he said, I gotta go. I'm gonna be a Broadway piano player. And then he said, you know, he left me some things to work on. But so my friend was taking lessons from a woman named Wanda Paik, and she said, if you don't practice 2 hours a day, then don't even take lessons from me. But I was still doing like very simple, almost like a nursery rhyme, little etude. So first recital was coming up, and I was ready to play my 1 page, maybe like 90 seconds of little etude. And the person before me in Wanda Paik's living room was a Harvard graduate student in music composition. And she had 2 grand pianos back to back. And it was a half-hour Beethoven piece for 2 pianos, half an hour.
Oh my
with
goodness.
a 50-page music book. And then little old me would like, ding, ding, ding. Anyway, I quit after that.
Oh, wow, wow.
Yeah, and then guitar, and then bass. Just curiously, what about you? What was your first?
Drums.
Oh, well, that's smart.
Yeah. So
that's the way to do it, like Trey.
Yeah. Oh, was Trey a drummer at first too as well?
Yeah, and he's so rhythmic.
Yeah. And that's even the way I think of bass now. I think of it as when people ask me, I'm like, I'm a drummer that plays notes. I mean, that's even mentally when I put bass lines together, I'm thinking almost like in terms of a beat, but the beats actually have
It's
notes.
so good. What did I just read? But everyone says starting on drums. You know what? I got to get a prop. Hold on.
Sure.
I actually have a couple items for show and tell, which I wasn't going to
oh, nice.
necessarily do. But I for the pandemic, another thing I did, well, the greatest thing, it's also singing with my daughter every night.
Yeah,
and
of course.
So there's some nice things going on. But for myself, I practice bass between 9 and 10 a.m. Usually it's not the whole hour. And then I do my workout with the trainer on Skype. But so I have a stack of old sheet music and magazines and books, and just to kind of work through and see if it gives me any inspiration. So I pulled this one out of the stack, Concepts for Bass Soloing.
Oh,
and
wow.
I don't even care too much about bass soloing anyway, but this is so deep, and it's two great bass players. Let's see, it's Chuck Scher and Mark Johnson. I've seen Mark Johnson a few times. Oops, I touched a button. Anyway, but this chapter 2, is an interesting one. And what they're saying, and it's all in rhythms, and they're saying just like you need to have like a kind of a knowledge of note combinations. The first chapter was playing like over scales and modes. This one is just rhythms, and they say you need to have a vocabulary of rhythms if your soloing is going to be interesting, just like you would have a vocabulary of licks. And so I never really thought of it that way. I probably do. We both probably have that anyway, but this exercise 10 is like, here are some advanced rhythmic figures to work on. Skip to exercise 11 if these are too difficult for your level of development. I'm like, oh shit, what is my level of development? And then pretty soon it's into like, okay, we have a quarter note triplet next to an eighth note triplet. And like, okay, I think I can get that going. And then the next bar is in 3/4, but it's a fourthlet, where the divisions are subdivided again.
And just any note, right? The note doesn't matter, right? You can do it on whatever those rhythms are on any note. Yeah.
And then what you're supposed to do is apply it to some melodies and stuff. But
wow, that's super
but
cool.
rhythm is so important. So anyway, that makes sense to me. That's
Definitely. Real quick, before you started touring with Phish and everything, did you do did you have like were you like the bass player in the high school band or any of that kind of stuff?
Well, I had my own band. I really wanted to have a band. And so there were two versions of it. It was just kids, like after school sort of thing. The first one was called the Tombstone Blues Band, based on the Bob Dylan song. And there was one guy from a different town pretty far away, Kerry. And his dad had played with Muddy Waters and Johnny Winter and Chuck Berry, and he brought this whole knowledge of blues and 60s music. And then at a certain point we just switched over. We called the band The Edge. We were in the school library in high school, and we said, okay, we can't think of a name. I'm just going to drop my finger on the map anywhere, and my finger went on The Edge. It has nothing to do with like you two.
Right.
And we got a guitar player, Peter Paul, from my high school. I'm still in touch with these people. Great guitar player. And later, Trey, when I first met Trey, I think we were freshmen, maybe sophomores. I took him home to Sudbury, Mass. I don't know why he was in the region without the rest of the band. And I took him over to Peter Paul's house, and we jammed.
Now, are we talking high school or college now? So high school?
Now I just started college, but
college.
I'm still
Okay, got it.
But I'm back in my town, and I don't know why I brought Trey over to Peter Paul's house, and we had a jam, and we played the Grateful Dead song, Scarlet Begonias. I'm not even legally allowed to admit that because we love the Grateful Dead and we collaborate with them, but we were so stigmatized early on that.
Sure, of course.
But that's what we did. We just had a little jam, and then I got to text Peter Paul, decades later. Oh, I'm in Soldiers Field in Chicago, and there's 80,000 people, and Trey is the guitar player, and started out right in your basement. Anyway, so I had those two bands. Oh, and we had Liz Allen. She was the singer, and we did like Talking Heads and Pretenders, and
oh, nice.
So that like new wave. Wrote a
couple original stuff, or was it all covers at that point?
We had a couple originals thrown in. They were kind of interesting. Bruce Deal was the drummer. He's such a cool guy. Bass players and drummers have such a bond, and he was my first one of even just going into his house after school and I'm glad we're sometimes still in touch. Anyway, and then I joined the high school jazz band just in the last semester, and we had this guy, Art Finstein. He was like been there for years and years, and it was cool. And we had like a 20-piece band. But then for the second semester, right before I'm going to go to college, they changed it up, and they had a guest conductor who was the conductor of the Harvard Jazz Band, Diego Poprakovich, and he was like a fireball, and he like 10, 20 new charts every day, and he's like, and I was in the jazz combo, and we'd turn off all the, like meet nights and turn off the lights. And we did Manteca, which is Dizzy Gillespie, just do 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 do, which Phish wrote a 20-second song called Crab in My Shoe Mouth based on. That's just Phish silliness coming through. And he said, I want the horns to just blow me over. And Diego's like dancing up and down, and you know, and this thing builds and builds. And I actually saw Dizzy Gillespie in a club in New York do the same thing. Percussionists and builds up, and finally goes to the bridge. But that was pretty wild, and I couldn't always keep the time, because some of these like hard bop tunes, like, and the whole time Diego would just, he said, I don't care what the hell you play for notes. Irrelevant. I just want you to keep time. And I couldn't even do that. And he would look at me and he'd say 2, 4. You know, he'd say the 2 and 4, like as if I'm supposed to feel the upbeats.
Yeah.
And I'd always just turn the beat around, and eventually I figured it out. But that's a nice little experience to, and he also said, you got to get this new teacher, Jim Stinnett, who just passed away last month. Okay. He was my mentor, and he said, whoever you have, he said, who's your bass teacher? And I said, Quentin Hodges, who was at the Sudbury Music Center where I had taken guitar. And that guy, Fran, is still there. Great guy, for like 50 years, has been at the Sudbury Music Center. And the guy came in, nice guy, Quentin Hodges, with a big black jumpsuit on, because he was going to go to the hotel and play Boogie Oogie Oogie after my lesson every time. And he was my first teacher, and I said, well, it's Quentin Hodges. And Diego Poprakovich said, nope, not anymore. Now you're going to have Jim Stinnett. And we went to the school office, and he signed me up. And that was like life lessons. I'd go to Jim Stinnett, and he's so into discipline, and it's like, I want you to, like, he said, every day, pick up the bass and practice and play it differently than the day before. I said this on an Instagram video recently when I did a little tribute. And he always wanted me to work on 3 things every day, which was technique, so my fingers would be doing what they're supposed to, and always wanted 4 fingers over 4 frets, and then concept, so I'd have little, like, this is concept. This is probably left over from Jim Stinnett from 30.
Yeah, sure.
And then playing, like play a whole song. And then he also wanted me to incorporate listening, like take a Charlie Parker album or whatever, listen to it until the grooves wear out. And so he was a real like life teacher. He wanted me to read books about like Van Gogh or, you know, people who had dedicated themselves to their craft.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, listen, hey, let's kind of semi-wrap things up with a question I kind of ask all my guests because of the world that we're in right now, and everybody's situation is different and everybody's outlook on this is different, so there is no right or wrong answer. But what do you think, Evelyn, for you personally and or the world of music, like say fall of 2021, or you know where do you feel like we're going to be at with live music then, in terms of like touring and festivals and et cetera, et cetera?
You know, I come from a school of thought that's been goal-oriented but never predicting the future. Yeah. Phish had these ideas we wanted to do, but we never knew next year what was going to happen, and never pretended that we could know. So it's interesting to kind of like have a vision without having a prediction, but in other words, rolling with it, I guess. Yeah. So but in terms of the feelings I'm getting from talking to music business people, they're getting a little bit confident, I gotta say, because
it feels that way. Yeah,
there's some venues around the world that are opening to 75% capacity, and Broadway is going to open soon, and outdoor shows. Some promoters are actually booking some outdoor amphitheater, whatever type, shows. And so fall, I give it a maybe. End of the year, beginning of next year, it's looking more promising. I mean, I'm just so happy doing this creative work, and I'm definitely getting hungry, like we all are, to jam and be with people. And
sure,
but I'm okay. I can last a little bit longer. Predict, but then on the darker side, you hear about like Brazil and how terrible things are going, and variants, and that it can't control it, and undermining the work of the other countries, and that's a little sad. But so I won't get overconfident. I won't really believe it till I see it. But yeah, something's got to give, probably.
Yeah, it feels that way for sure too.
Before we wrap up, I know this isn't as much about you, but two things. I want to say I have a lot of respect for you and what you do, and more especially how many videos you put out is baffling to me, because it's not just like throw up the cameras and do something. It's sets and costumes and makeup and guests and fancy editing, and I'm pretty blown away. And so congratulations on that output. And
thank you.
And then of course with your bass playing, but your style, and I brought 3 pairs of glass. This is the one that you gave me. I had to show off. Which
I forgot I got this
incredible.
For you. Yeah.
And then
you got me some cool glasses too.
Oh yeah, that kind of rings a bell. I brought 2 others out from my older collection. We're gonna have to roll with the cords being in the way. And this is light up, if it'll still work. Let's see. You're gonna have to tell me if it's working, because I feel like it's working.
A little bit. You can kind of tell a little bit.
Now and
yeah,
a little bit too crazy. And then finally, this is a classic. We got the
I'm digging those
chains.
There you go.
So I think we're kind of like, we had a great photo shoot with Renee when we had the lipstick and the scarves.
Yes.
I hope that picture got out somehow, because anyway, I love kind of like sharing not only the acoustical but the visual visions with you as time progresses.
Oh, totally. Well, and I'm sure this is obviously with you too. It's like when I was developing my ears for music, it was almost kind of symbiotic in terms of I was seeing the visual along with the music.
Yeah.
I remember being asleep on my mom's couch, and one of the first big music experiences I had, it was the Ashes to Ashes video for David Bowie, and that was like I connect with both musically and also it was kind of happening at the same time.
Yeah.
So to me, they're almost the same thing.
I agree. And a lot of my career has been framed by these night dreams where I sort of imagine being on stage, and then I've had these moments on stage where if I'm having a really good experience, I feel like I can sort of connect through my subconscious to those dreams and feel like I'm there. So there's this back and forth bridge between awake and dreaming, and the visual has just always been so important to me. So I can relate.
Definitely. Well, cool. Well, hey, Mike. Well, thank you so much for being on
the
show. Yeah,
thanks for having me.
I can't wait to all the stuff, this music you're talking about. I mean, I know I've heard little bits and pieces here and there, but I can't wait to hear the finished, whatever finished is nowadays.
Yeah,
too,
thanks.
So, but super excited, and I hope your family stays safe and strong, and can't wait to see you in person here soon.
Okay.
Take
Likewise.
Bye-bye.